Leadership. We all know a great leader, and we also know a leader who isn't so good. On today's podcast, I had the pleasure of welcoming on Curtis Sprouse, who is the CEO and president of Eureka Connect and the Institute of Biomedical Entrepreneurship. On today's podcast, episode 101 of the Grappling Growth Podcast, we delve into the makeup of the leaders who aren't so good and why it is so important, why arguably the most important decision of your life is picking your life partner. Because if you don't have a good, stable home, then how can you expect to be the leader and the person you want to be in the corporate world and within your business? Curtis has a wisdom, a wealth of knowledge that he shares on here. We hardly talk about business. We talk more so about personal values and alignment. Enjoy.
As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Joe Testori, and the Grappling Growth Podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy.
Curtis, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me today.
Curtis, I'm curious, what does growth look like to you?
What does growth look like to me? I think that growth for a corporation, growth for an organization, growth for an individual. Where would you like me to focus the answer?
It's completely discretionary to you.
Well, I think growth from an individual perspective is people constantly thinking about how to elevate the people around them. I think we elevate ourselves by elevating those around us. I think that's the emphasis of a lot of the work that we do with executive teams. Many times, teams are trying to manage a situation, and I think that they fail to understand that they need to elevate the ability of those around them to think, to define problems, and to solve problems. So I think growth is a function of us being more aware of how to develop and strengthen connection between others and how to navigate a broader spectrum of situations, which I think I was listening to one of the previous podcasts you did where the gentleman said being a lifelong learner was a key attribute of things that he felt were important in his life. And I would wholeheartedly agree with that. This idea that we should be learning something new every day. And in this dynamic world, I think that's ever more important.
Why do you think, my perspective is that so many people fail to neglect that? And the lens of to learn is to grow with others, to serve others. But I think personally,
I'm sorry, Joe, I think you froze up a little bit.
Most people only think about themselves from an individualistic perspective, whereas if they think of it as a me to we continuum, then if they can elevate the team, the community they have around them, then the collective sum is greater than the input all individually.
I think societally, we reward individual accomplishment. Right, it starts at a very young age, and I don't think there's anything wrong with this concept of people having to perform and there's accountability at an individual level, but I don't think we do anything to really nurture or develop that idea of developing and strengthening those around us. I think that's the failure of our educational system, is that we focus so much on the individual attaining knowledge and demonstrating their ability to attain that knowledge, that we've failed to help those individuals understand the importance of building relationships and connections and a deeper ability to comprehend what's going on around them, just not attain information, but to be more critical of what's the source of that information, what was the thinking that went behind one's need to, ability to, and desire to convey that information to another. And so I think that we could improve the individuals and strengthen individuals within our society by strengthening their ability to understand these concepts at an earlier age and actually holding them accountable for demonstrating them, as well as the individual knowledge attained through the educational process.
When you look at the best leaders that you've coached and you've worked with, what are the common traits and characteristics you've been able to observe from them?
I think that there's a broad spectrum of people that I've met that I would count as extraordinary leaders. And I would say that there's many different ways to be a great leader. I think there are very clear ways to be a bad one. It's almost easier to help people understand things that they shouldn't do. Disrespecting people around them, looking at people as sort of, not understanding that these are actual people that work for you. That as opposed to they serve nothing more than a purpose within an organization. That mindset I think can be dangerous, but it can also be effective. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that people that are driving others to just get the work done and managing through fear. I mean, it does produce financial and economic outcomes that are desirable. I just don't think it's sustainable. Matter of fact, I've never seen it be sustainable. But go ahead.
Sorry. Who were a few people in the public limelight who you would deem as bad leaders, and why?
Bad leaders in the public limelight. Well, I think one in Steve Jobs. I don't know that he was a great leader. I think he was a great visionary. I think he was brilliant. I think his understanding of how to develop products that would be a benefit to society, and how to nurture the understanding of society in adopting and utilizing those products. I think he was brilliant in that respect. But anybody that's done any reading on his life, they know that he was a volatile personality. He was a difficult person to be around. He was fired 3 times from his own companies. So I think he's an example of someone that was as brilliant as he was flawed in his ability to lead and develop a company. I think that there are people. I would also say, Jack Welch did many amazing things as a leader of GE. He was a difficult person. He's a difficult personality. And one of the things I like to look to is look at one's personal life. Do they have they found that significant other, that spouse, or someone that they've navigated a long period of time with, and they've built a family. I think that's also a good indicator of some of the strengths one would have as a leader, and how that would relate to their ability to influence people within an organization. So, not to say that that's strictly there are things that happen in relationships. It can be. I'm aware of people that have a significant other that's had a breakdown or had substance abuse issues. You can't put that all on the spouse as their fault, and it can be a reason why relationships fall apart. But many times you find that really great leaders have developed stability at home as well as within their organizations. And so I think those are things that we've found to be, for people that are consistently great leaders throughout their lives, people that you would aspire to emulate. I think you see this balance between their personal and professional lives.
Yeah, it was Jordan Peterson who said the most important decision you have to make in life is who your life partner is. And Michael Jordan, I've just finished devouring not his content but his previous coach's content, Tim Grover, if you're familiar with him.
No, I'm not familiar with that, his work or his writings.
So really fascinating stuff, but he's written a few books, one called Relentless, Good, Great, Unstoppable, and then another on winning. And he spoke about Tiger Woods and essentially his breakdown, and after his breakdown, and it just everything was thrown into the public limelight in and around, 2008-9, and he was never the same athlete before. But he basically said that you can see once that was thrown out there, he was never the same person before. And you can see that structure. Once the fragility of his personal life was broken and it was shown to be, this is who he was, the poster boy or poster man of golf for so many years in the 2000s. After that, he was never there. And it's interesting looking at that, because we think of athletes at times as they just continue to do what they do. Nothing in their personal life affects them. But fundamentally, we're all humans, and we see it up and down when we have cycles where our performance is off. And ultimately, do you lose respect for a leader who you find out they're not as angelic as you previously thought they were before?
I think sports is a great analogy, and I think the one that you're using around Tiger Woods is one. If you look years and years ago when Tiger Woods was first emerged as just a tremendous athlete and golfer, Jack Nicklaus was once asked, "What do you think about Tiger? He's clearly going to break all your records." And Jack Nicklaus's response was, "We'll see." Because, Tiger Woods at that point was single. He didn't have a family. He wasn't trying to raise kids. He hadn't experienced the physical breakdown that an athlete, is going to experience. And lo and behold, Jack Nicklaus is right. Tiger Woods never did break Jack Nicklaus's records as far as number of wins and Masters and so on and so forth. But I think that what we find is in athletics, and I think it probably holds true in just about every aspect of life, there's a point where we reach our pinnacle. As an athlete, it's very clear. There's a physical, where you build your body up and before it starts to break down, right? And everybody experiences. Michael Jordan experienced it. Tiger Woods experienced it. Any great football or baseball or track athlete experiences that point where the skills start to diminish. And then the problem you have as an athlete is the public scrutinizes that. And they see, well, geez, so-and-so's lost a step, or they're not as great as they used to be, which is to be expected. It's what's going to happen, right? But society is very hard on those individuals. I think a leader of a company is no different. It takes tremendous focus, attention, effort. It's a different kind of stress. It's maybe not always the physical stress that you see in an athletic environment, but the intellectual stress and challenges and demands are there. And I think there gets to be a point in our lives where we start to diminish in our ability to be able to handle that. And it's scrutinized, maybe not as publicly, probably in public companies it is, but that scrutiny of the breakdown or diminishing of the individual relative to being able to do all of these things the way they did when they were at the height of their game. I think that's something that we don't necessarily deal well with. But there are also examples of people that are tremendous leaders, late into their careers. But I think what I've seen with those individuals, Joe, is that they've learned to adapt how they do it. And more often than not, what they've done is by the time they get along in their careers, they've surrounded themselves with such amazing people that they've been able to delegate for certain things that they may have done themselves earlier in their careers, so that they're not taking the burden on that they did earlier. They learn to sort of build around them such that they don't become the center of everything that has to be done or needs to be done.
So a question that's really been imprinted in my mind since you were talking there. You mentioned, and we see this all the time with athletes, it's always said that your athletic peak is around 28 to 32. It really depends on what sport you're in. For a leader, when do you think, let's say, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, at what age do you think a leader is at their pinnacle?
I don't think it's an age thing. I have seen very young people who, let's say late 20s, early 30s, who demonstrate extraordinary leadership skills. Maybe not that experienced dynamic that you see with people that are more mature, maybe in their later 40s or 50s, but they demonstrate great people skills. They have great intuition. They're students of the situation around them. They typically are very bright, so they acquire knowledge quickly, but they also know how to use and work with that knowledge. So I've seen people very young exhibit great skills and be people that I enjoy working with, and I find that they are going to be successful. But I would say that there's no substitute for experience. And I think that, as people get into their 30s, I think they start to, in many cases, they've had at least 10 years of working. And depending on what kinds of situations they've put themselves in, they've probably seen or can have had the opportunity to have seen a broad spectrum of situations. And so they're more adept at navigating situations and people. But, I think that on whole, people that start to get their mid-30s to mid-40s probably have had enough opportunity to develop themselves in a way where they can be effective, if not extraordinary leaders. And I think that, more often than not, though, I think a majority of the people that I've worked with that have demonstrated great leadership skills are probably in their 40s or a little beyond that, where they've just had more experience. They've had more time. The other thing, too, is if you think about it, if I reflect on it, I also think once you get to your 40s, if you've started a family, that family is, your kids that are a certain age now where you don't have the physical demands you had when they were younger. It's more of an intellectual dynamic between the parent and the kids, where you're helping them formulate, their thinking and their direction and trying to keep them on the right track. So I think from a personal perspective too, many people are in a better position to maybe put some more focus on organization or work as they get to that point in their life, because they don't have the same type of demands on their time from a family perspective. But again, that's going to vary based on when and how people develop their families.
I read a study before that looked at men in relationships are more successful than single men, and married men are more successful than both of them. And I think, there's several variables and factors that come into play with that, I'm sure. I wanted to ask you a relatively personal and direct question, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
And it was something that ruminated in my mind, and I was like, I'd be really remiss if I didn't ask, do you think you've already achieved or hit your pinnacle, or is that still to come?
Great question. I think that the energy and the way that I navigated things when I was younger has changed. Not that I'm massively diminished energy, but I don't have the desire to put in 12-hour days. On occasion, I have to do it. But when I was younger, putting in those 10, 12-hour days was, it was easier to do it for me than it is now. I think my desire to be more efficient, also having the luxury of, further along in my career, I've got a greater ability to choose what I want to do and when I want to do it. So I think there's a couple things that have changed that have allowed me to moderate the intensity that I need to bring in, the duration of that intensity during the course of a day. I think that I'm able to focus on things that are probably more relevant from a standpoint of working with businesses that have greater opportunity, stronger teams, better capitalized. When I was younger, sometimes you don't have the luxury of making those choices. So I think I'm more effective now than I was when I was younger, because the experience has helped me to understand how to select and how to focus my time. But I would say that probably when I was younger, I wish I had some of that energy and drive that I had. So, there are trade-offs. I believe that the experience has helped me in many ways to do things better. But I think just, having some age on the body and the desire to grind like I used to, that's definitely changed quite a bit.
If you could give one golden life rule to 20-year-old Curtis or any young person listening to this right now, what would you say to them?
I think the number one thing is something that you alluded to earlier, which is, pick the right life partner. And I believe, and not everybody has, I feel like I've been very blessed that, Steph and I found each other, my wife Stephanie and I, and we've had 3 healthy, thriving children, which is not a given. These are things that I believe are blessings and good fortune that is not everybody is able to attain. But I think if, work towards not settling for that life partner. My prayer for my 3 children is that they find someone that they can support and that will support them, and that they can navigate life in a way where they find joy and they create joy within their family. So number 1 is picking that right person. Regardless of what you do, having someone to share that with, having somebody that supports you when you're challenged, it's just a wonderful thing to have. I think secondly is something that your previous podcast guest said, which is be a lifelong learner. Don't ever stop learning. And I think continually trying to build oneself up. And, you asked me about great leaders. I would say probably one of the leaders that I admire the most would be John Wooden. And I don't know if you're familiar with John Wooden. He was a basketball coach. Wooden on Leadership, I think, is a wonderful book. But John Wooden coached 11 national championship teams at UCLA. And what he really saw himself was more of an intellectual than a basketball coach. And there is a TED Talk that he did. I think he was 93 years old when he did it. And if you listen to him quote poetry, Bible verses, his ability to recant and remember things that he had read and things that he had learned, was extraordinary at that advanced age. And I think that that's an example, or he was an example of somebody that was a lifelong learner and a lifelong teacher. I have this saying I like to use in the training programs. There are sort of 3 things that guide me. Number 1 is create a holy moment for others. Laugh, think, cry, and love. I stole that from Jimmy Valvano in his SB speech. And then the last one is learn to teach and teach to learn. And I think that's a concept that I probably adapted from, just reading and studying the work of John Wooden. So those are some of my thoughts on that idea of that leadership and what's important.
I'm going to listen to this excerpt once again. I think the point you made about your partner being making sure that you're getting that right, and then everything else you said secondary. And it's something, and I feel very privileged to sit on podcasts like these, talk to gentlemen, people like yourself who have so much wisdom and experience in these realms, in very different verticals. But it keeps on giving me a good guiding force to know what I need to look out for very quickly, and equally know what I need to really just focus my energy on. Between you and your wife, what were the things you looked out for and you said, yeah, this is the person for me?
Oh, geez, that's a great question.
I'm sure you've got a laundry list.
I think, I had been in other serious relationships, so it's not like this was the only one I had ever had. And I can't say that there was anything bad about any of them. They were great relationships, and at those points in my life, they were healthy, and they were they were good people that I connected to on multiple levels. But I think what's different about Stephanie is that she helped me to look at things differently. She's a linguist. She's not one that studied business or spent a lot of time focused on business, but she was more, her educational path was more in language and communication and understanding people. And I think that she opened my eyes in many ways to different things that I hadn't really thought about or put a lot of time into thinking about. Secondly, she's just a nice person. She's a kind person. She's the kind of person that really puts others first. And I think that was another thing that really helped us to connect. I think we both sort of looked at that as being an important thing. And then I always say that you can be very different personalities when you meet your significant other, as long as your life goals are the same. And I think we've always shared those life goals, like what was important about how we'd raise kids and what were the principles under which we'd raise kids. And
what were the principles,
and even,
if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I think a lot of it is that, I'm a religious person. I was raised Catholic, and I am still practicing Catholic. Our children were raised Catholic, even though my wife Stephanie is not Catholic; she's Methodist. But she did teach Sunday school. She agreed to. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Okay. She agreed to support me and my faith and teaching our kids the faith that I believe strongly in. So I think that was one thing. I think one of the principles is teach your kids to believe in something that isn't just them. And again, when I talk to teams and groups, you don't have to believe what I believe, but I do believe you need to believe in something that's not you. I have never found anybody that's a great leader that thinks that they're at the center of the universe. I think that you have to understand it. There's a humility to understand there's something far bigger than you. So I think those are some of the principles. I think that teaching our kids to be lifelong learners, to have a good, strong moral compass. My mom used to say when my brother and I were young, you always knew right from wrong. You knew it at a very young age. That doesn't always mean you chose right, but you knew when you were doing wrong. And I think giving our children a good sense of what that meant and how they navigated relationships and friendships and different endeavors. I can remember my youngest son, Luke, there was one time where he came home from school, he was pretty young, and he goes, "Dad, sometimes it's really hard to do the right thing." And I'm proud of him coming home and saying that, because he acknowledged and recognized that, yeah, sometimes doing the right thing is difficult. It isn't always rewarded. So I think those are just some of the themes that I can think about. And there are many, many more I could probably share with you, but those are some of the main ones.
Beautiful. I'm curious, looking at yourself as a leader and business, how do you think you relay those values into what you do on a day-to-day basis with those who you lead and guide?
I think number one is helping the leaders that I work with understand what their objective is. Some of them are very talented and they've got great experience, and most of what I'm doing is helping them to examine situations and make sure that we're not missing anything. Once they've sort of thought through the different options, and if I can avail a different way of looking at something. So for the very talented, experienced leaders, more often than not, it's being a sounding board and helping them to sort of look at the realm of possibility and have we defined the problems accurately. That's typically the focus of most of those interactions. It can be on occasion where they're not working on relationships properly, or they're not defining things properly because they're not taking in enough information. They're stretched in too many directions. But most of the time it's about accurate definition of a problem and what are the real options. As it relates to some of the younger leaders, a lot of it has to do with not trying to manage situations, but getting people around them to think. And I guess that would extend to those more talented, more experienced leaders as well. But oftentimes what you find is the younger leaders are just trying to prove to everybody that they deserve to be a leader. And they're trying to manage to an objective, whether it's a timeline or an outcome or an economic accomplishment or objective. And they sort of miss important elements along that journey or that path. And so helping them to sort of think about how they navigate that process, where they put the emphasis, and creating some balance. So many leaders are imbalanced. I was talking to I was at a dental appointment yesterday, and was talking about the concept of sleep with the dentist. This is a new dentist that I went to yesterday, and we were talking about this concept of sleep, and he was talking about how many of his patients really struggle with sleep, and I told him I see the same thing with many of the leadership teams I work with, that very, very, very few people are getting 8 hours of quality sleep, and we know that you're cognitively and physically diminished if you're not getting adequate sleep. So many times I'll joke with teams I work with or leaders that if all I can do is get you to sleep 8 hours a night, I made my money's, whatever you paid me was probably worth it. So I think it's creating balance more than just the sleep. It's just getting outside, getting some exercise, not grinding 12, 14 hours a day every day. That's another component of it. I think that it's extremely important.
And kind of pinning that into today's modern society, I'd argue that it's never been easier to achieve that balance with most companies give people the opportunity to work from home if they work a corporate job. The leverage we have from artificial intelligence as well means that we can become more efficient, and I believe we're probably living in the most efficient era we've ever lived in, and that will just continue to compound as time goes on. With what you're doing, how does AI weave its way in? Are you using many AI stacks, and how does that look for you right now?
I personally use it in a relatively low level, looking at, I'm a severe dyslexic, so AI is great for reviewing documents and spell check and, cleaning up grammar and things that I write. And I write a lot during the course of a day, whether it's working on, articles or the book I'm writing or, just documents or explaining things to others. So I think AI is, some of those tools have proved to be very valuable. Even constructing some graphics that sort of take a concept and put it into a graphic depiction. I think that I found that to be beneficial. From a company perspective, we're really diving into it, looking at how to automate a lot of our offering on the behavioral side, where we use an AI agent to deliver feedback. And we've actually started to test these concepts, and it works really well, actually. Disappointingly so. I realized that I'm not as valuable as I thought I was when you can have an AI agent provide a feedback, and it's in some ways it's even better because of the AI agent's ability to identify resources or materials that could be a benefit to that individual. Think of it this way. If in my lifetime I've read 1,000 books on behavior, how much of that content do I remember? And how much of the relevant content to Joe can I recall at a moment in time when there might be an opportunity for me to avail something that I was exposed to that would be a benefit to you? An AI agent, as it's trained, will be able to do that better than a human being. Now, there's the difference in, I would think that I'm better at emotionally connecting to someone during an interaction than an AI agent's going to be. But there are aspects of it that I think will compensate for that emotional piece, and then we'll have to figure that out too. I think that you're still going to need a human touch point with many people that go through our program, but we'll figure that out as we go, and how much of that is necessary to maintain the high quality that we want to see. So yeah, there's lots of areas. I'm also working right now on a company that's putting together a healthcare registry where we're identifying unique data sets, and we put them into a registry where the patients are consented to allow us to have access to their data. And we're capturing really unique data sets on these individuals. And then that data would be utilized to understand progression of disease or understanding existence of disease, what factors may be causation or correlation to where there might be things that had not been understood previously, because these new data sets reveal something that we didn't quite understand. I mean, if we look at biology and what we know about biology compared to what we probably need to know, it's probably fractional. I've heard many great scientists, and again, this is their thinking, not mine, that we know about 10% of what we need to know as it relates to biology. So I think AI and unique and new data sets combined with existing things like medical records and test results, I think it will start to shed more light on things as it relates to what and how, what disease, what constitutes disease, what are the factors that cause various diseases, and then how do we treat them.
So well said. Curtis, where can people find you and what's next for you?
So eurekaconnect.com is my behavioral website. ibeinc.org is the Institute for Biomedical Entrepreneurship, which is a not-for-profit that I run. It's a 5-day course on translation for innovators in the biomedical healthcare sector. We have a program coming up December the 3rd here in Cambridge. If people would like to learn more, you can go to our website, or you can contact my assistant on either the behavioral side or on the IB side. And her name is Shana, Shana Reed, Reed. And you can reach her at sreed@eurekaconnect.com. And so, happy to work with anybody on the behavioral side. We do work with individuals and teams on that front, and anybody that's interested in learning more about the IBE and that program would love to share more information on that if there's interest.
Curtis, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Joe, thank you for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.